Good evening, everyone from all across the United States. We're absolutely thrilled that you could join us this evening for Green Amendment Day, a panel of leading environmental justice voices. My name's Maria Payan. I'm the Senior Regional Representative for Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, and I work mainly in areas in the Chesapeake Bay watershed states, the Delmarva region. We advocate for an equitable and socially responsible food system. I will be moderating the event this evening. I'm going to turn it over for a second to Maya Van Rossum, who is the founder of Green Amendments for the Generations, as well as the Delaware River Keeper. And she is going to make an announcement on land acknowledgement.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you everybody for joining us for National Green Amendments Day. We're so pleased that everybody's here. But we really wanted to begin our whole program by acknowledging that participants to tonight's event, those of us speaking, but also all of you attending, are gathered on the traditional homelands of Native American communities. That I wanted to acknowledge that the lands where I am now standing are those of the Lenni Lenape tribe. I come with respect for this land that I am on today and for the people who have and do now reside here. And I have been so grateful personally by the ability to work with and learn from the Lenape people over the years about how to be a better caretaker for Mother Earth. And I look forward to continuing our partnership of respect and care for the earth into the future. We that are part of our Green Amendments for the Generations movement, we make a pledge to honor the land of these indigenous peoples, including the water, the air, and all natural things. And we come to this meeting to talk about how we can work together to protect our natural resources and the rights of all people, including both present and future generations, to pure water, clean air, a livable and stable climate, and to the healthy environments through the passage of constitutional green amendments. We acknowledge the need for meaningful consultation with Indigenous communities about the effects of constitutional green amendments. And we thank and we honor all Native American tribes and appreciate the opportunity to work with you and to learn from your teachings. So thank you for the opportunity to acknowledge all that you have gifted to us by allowing us the opportunity to be on this land that you have so lovingly cared for and to work with you to protect it now and into the future.
Thank you, Maya. So as Maya was saying, Green Amendment Day is dedicated to bringing together civil rights, environmental justice, and Indigenous leaders, as well as community activists and members across the nation engaging around the power of green amendments for ending environmental racism and restoring environmental justice through constitutionally protected environmental rights. We have a packed agenda with some leading voices across the country working on environmental justice issues and solutions. With us tonight are Dr. Jacoby Wilson, Senator Antoinette Sedillo Lopez, Terry Sloan, Carrie Evelyn Harris, and Maya Van Rossum. Our thoughts are going to go out to Kim Gaddy, the founder and director of the South Ward Environmental Alliance, who could not be with us this evening. We're going to jump right in. I want to first introduce you to Carrie Evelyn Harris. If you are from Delaware, she probably needs no introduction. We immediately connected on our advocacy of justice issues when Carrie was running for US Senate. I think I met Carrie back in 2017. Carrie has dedicated her life as a leader, an activist. She is a mother. She's a veteran and a queer woman of color. Carrie believes her core mission in life is to improve the lives of everyone with the solutions that lift everyone up, especially in social and environmental justice issues. Before Carrie gives the opening remarks, I want to let everyone know that we will be doing a Q&A session. So please feel free to type any questions in either the Q&A box or the chat box. You can do that now. so that we can get as many answered as possible. And with that, Carrie, would you like to take it away?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We were really excited to hear how many people had signed up for this evening's program. People from across the nation are joining from coast to coast. And so thank you for everyone who made the earlier time zone work, especially during a week day. That really does mean a lot. And the truth is, we're in this together. As I like to say, the issue with environmental justice is people think that you can silo the problem, but you can't build a wall high enough or dig a hole deep enough to escape the pollution, the corporate takeover of all of our air, all of our water. And so this is definitely an effort that is going to take all hands on deck. As a veteran, I know what it means to have the security of our country be threatened. There is no greater threat right now than climate change. And climate change is a direct effect of environmental injustice. People feeling that you can put the weight of industry on the shoulders of those who they feel have the least political impact, the least political power, which are communities of color and low income or low wealth communities. And let me be very clear, the difference between low income and low wealth, because people often don't put themselves in certain categories. You can be low wealth and have a very high income, but there are a lot of pressures in our society, including student loan debt, healthcare debt, and just the fact that the cost of living is outgrowing our income levels. So let me be very clear when I say, when we talk about poverty and the impact of environmental justice, 4 out of 5 of us are living paycheck to paycheck. And as a result of that, our political power is being stripped away. But collectively, we can fight, and we can fight well together. We can make it so that people do not take advantage of us. That we can do as Dr. Jacoby Wilson often says, and he'll speak, and he'll say it better and faster, because he speaks fast, that environmental justice is everywhere, right? And he's gonna do it better, like I said, where we eat, pray, live, learn, where we love, right? This is the truth. It's not 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road that we have to make a change. It's not just recycling our water bottles or our detergent bottles. It's making the decision to tell industry to do their job better. It's not about what we're going to say no to, but what we will say yes to. How we can improve processes so that we can all live a stronger, healthier life. And understanding that if we don't, there are direct impacts on all of us. If I get emotional on this one, people will understand why, but I recently found out that my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And I bring this up because she wanted me to be here. And she said, Carrie, there are 2 things I want you not to drop the ball on while I'm sick. And it's this fight for environmental justice and universal health care. And in this past week, my mother was diagnosed with cancer last Monday. Both came into play. The first was when we were wondering, how did it happen? And we live in the same community. And when I bought my house 2 years ago, we had our water tested and our nitrate levels were high. So we had a system put in. My parents used to have a system and it got old. And when I told them about our nitrate levels, they decided to replace it. But there was about a 2-year span where they did not have a filtration system. And my mom drinks water like a fish, and that's supposed to be healthy. But our first thing was, did you get it from the water, right? And that's not something anybody should be concerned about. You should not wonder if the water you drink is going to kill you. You should not wonder if the air you breathe is going to cause your children asthma or yourself asthma or other issues. We know that polluted air and water causes any number of health issues, major organ failure, learning disabilities, cancer. We know that this is something that is going to come for all of us if we are not careful. Entire communities are seeing each other die or live a low quality of life because of the injustice of industry taking over our communities. We can do better. We deserve better. And at the end of the day, knowing that all of these injustices are happening, we end up in hospitals and then are told, well, we're not sure if the insurance is going to cover that. All these struggles are connected. If you're on here and you don't know if environmental justice is your thing, know that it touches everything. Criminal justice. There are correctional facilities that still have asbestos and lead in the paint. Education, lead in the water, asbestos in the building. We know that healthcare is affected because most of us cannot afford the healthcare that we will need that results from these environmental injustices. If you name it, environmental justice touches it. And we need to make it clear that this is something we will not stand for lightly, that we will push until there is no more fight in us and change is real. And it can be. And it can start with ensuring that people can no longer give us lip service. We can ensure that clean air and water are a right to each and every one of us. Because if that right had been there 2 years ago, 3 years ago, perhaps people like my mother would not be diagnosed with cancer. Maybe we can save 1 or 2 before it's too late. And so I encourage you to learn more, to get involved, to know that there is a place for you in this fight. Regardless of what you think your other passions are, you have to be a part of this fight because we can win it. And making sure that we have a green amendment and at the state level and eventually at the national level is something that we need all hands on deck for. We can win, and we can only win if we have as many people involved. But please don't be discouraged when I say that, because change happens with 10%. Statistically, if you get 10% of the population to agree to something, great change can happen. That's why all statistical studies are based on 10% of any population. We need 10% of you, 10% of you to say we're going to create change. Then we need to have you find 10% of the people in your community to say they're going to create change. And then we can do what we need to do to save every single person in this nation and on this planet, which is 10%. I ask you to be resilient. I ask you to find that personal story that drives you, that pushes you past that fatigue, that disappointment, to make sure that we can keep fighting day after day. There's this great photo that I saw that has an old cassette tape. And it says on there, anybody that knows about cassette tapes, you can hit pause or you can hit record, right? Or you can hit stop. And it says, hit pause if you need to, but never stop. Take a pause if you need a break, y'all, but never stop. Because change can happen, but it starts with you. So thank you all. Please love on your loved ones, kiss them, call them if you haven't spoken to them in a while, because you never know if it's your last moment. But know that change can happen if you stick with it. So thank you all. I have to run to get things in line for my mother, but make sure you know you're not in this alone and we will win. So thank you. Maya, to you.
Thanks, Carrie. I'm going to ask, this is kind of unconventional, but I know Carrie's mother, and Carrie's mother is a fighter, just like Carrie. So I'm going to ask that everyone on here, I believe in the power of positive. So please remember and lift up anyone who is dealing with these effects, right? With cancer, and let's all put our positive energy together. With that, Maya, I am going to send it to you to teach us about the solutions.
Well, thank you so much, Maria. And I know Carrie's gone, but I told her to take my positive energy with her Sadly, she and I share something in common, which was that I too, at one point, suddenly found out that my mother had pancreatic cancer, and it was a shock to her, and it was a shock to me. And so it's difficult times. And thank you, Maria, for that call for positive energy. And thank you, Carrie, for really setting the stage for this powerful evening to really focus on a pathway that I believe is powerful and important for achieving true environmental justice across communities. It's, of course, the Green Amendments for the Generations movement. We all agreed that I would introduce myself because I have a way of doing that that then leads into my talk. So I am Maya Van Rossum. I am the founder of the National Green Amendments for the Generations book, author of the book titled The Green Amendment, where I identified and defined what a Green Amendment is. But I've also had the honor for the last 27 years of serving as the Delaware Riverkeeper and leader of the 4-state organization, the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, that does advocacy and litigation to literally fight the good fight for our beautiful Delaware River and all the communities that depend upon her and her watershed. And it is as a result of this 27 years of advocacy and litigation, trying to use the laws that we have on the books to fight the good fight for true environmental protection and true environmental justice, that I really have come to realize that despite the fact that we have hundreds of thousands of environmental protection laws, policies, programs, agencies, regulations, a whole system of government that's supposed to be focused on environmental protection and environmental justice, this system of laws is fundamentally failing us. And we know that because of all the things that Carrie spoke about and all the things that we experience in our communities, because we do have communities, people across the nation that are drinking contaminated water and breathing contaminated air. We are facing a climate crisis, and environmental racism is sadly alive and well. And all of these are happening not in spite of the environmental protection laws and the system of government that we have when it comes to the environment. These things are happening because of those laws, because of how they're intentionally written and how they are intentionally implemented day in and day out. And so we can see truly by just what's happening on the ground that we do need a new path for environmental protection and a new path for justice. In one of the versions of this talk, I try to go through a little bit about how and why the law fundamentally fails us. But you know what? We don't need to understand that to know that it is failing us and that we do truly need a new path for protection and for justice. And I'm here to suggest to you that what we need in very significant part is we really need to raise up our inalienable human rights to clean water and clean air, a stable climate and healthy environments, so they are given the same highest legal recognition, standing, and protection as all the other fundamental rights we hold dear, like the rights to free speech and freedom of religion, private property rights, even the right to bear arms. These fundamental rights that people hold dear are given highest legal standing and protection here in the United States of America, a standing and protection that is not given to our rights to a clean and healthy environment. And so what we need to do for the environment, which is what we do for all these other fundamental rights, is we need to provide meaningful constitutional recognition and protection for our rights to a clean and healthy environment. And I want to stress the word meaningful. Meaningful is so very important, because not just any language will do when it comes to recognizing environmental rights in our state and federal constitutions. The truth is that almost every single state across the United States of America, all those that are colored in, talk about the environment, and in some cases very eloquently talk about environmental rights in their constitutions. But only 2 states, only Pennsylvania and Montana, that are highlighted in green, actually give the rights to a clean and healthy environment that same highest legal recognition and protection that we do in fact give to those other fundamental rights that we hold dear. What's the problem with what those states in purple are doing when they talk about the environment in their state constitutions? Well, They tend to talk about whether they're in the Bill of Rights or lower down in the Constitution. They often talk about things like the right to fish, hunt, and trap, the right to land preservation, or the right to navigate waterways. These are all really wonderful and important things to people, but they are not the same thing as the right to clean water and clean air. Some of those states in purple talk very eloquently and powerfully about the rights of people to clean water, to clean air, to a clean and healthy environment. But then they begin or they end the sentence or the section with, and that's good public policy. Well, under the law, public policy is just good advice. And like in the rest of our lives, right? Good advice, you can take it or you can leave it. And when it comes to this eloquent language about environmental rights, that's just good public policy, all too often our government officials leave it. Other of those states in purple might talk eloquently about the rights to a clean and healthy environment, but then they begin or end the sentence or the section with, and the way you get these rights is that your state legislators will go forth and pass laws to protect the environment. But the truth is, our legislators already have that authority and they're already utilizing that authority. But it hasn't made a difference, as Carrie talked about and as I began this talk recognizing. I mean, truly what that language does is it gives you a constitutional right to have your legislators legislate. Whether they do a good job or a bad job, or there are lots of gaps in the work that they're doing when it comes to environmental protection or environmental justice, as long as they're legislating somehow, some way on the environment, the constitutional obligation has been fulfilled. But the people are no better off when it comes to environmental rights or environmental justice. And just overall, I mean, you know, writ large, what these states in purple don't do is they do not, in fact, recognize the rights to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments as being on par with and protected as powerfully as those other fundamental rights, like speech, property, religion, etc. And so what is it that Pennsylvania and Montana do that's different? Well, I can tell you that I have looked at every single state constitution across our nation, and I have considered that question very, very carefully. And what Pennsylvania and Montana do is dramatically different, and it makes all the difference in the world when it comes to environmental rights. What Pennsylvania and Montana do is they have what I have defined to be constitutional green amendments. They have all of the essentials plus more. And so I'm going to go through with you a couple of the essentials of what I've defined to be a constitutional green amendment that does give highest constitutional recognition and protection to environmental rights. But I want to highlight that there are other things that are really powerful and important that we really recommend, that I recommend be included in a constitutional green amendment. But the ones on the screen are amongst the fundamentals, the must-haves, the things we cannot sacrifice. So first off, the language has to be in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. That's where we put all of those other fundamental rights. That's where we need to put our rights to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment. They have to recognize these rights, these environmental rights, as belonging to all people, and ideally use generational language. They have to be clear about the kinds of rights that we're protecting, that we are protecting clean water, clean air, a stable climate, healthy environments, healthy ecosystems, and so on. They have to be self-executing, which means they don't depend upon the passage of any state laws to define them or give them legal life. If somebody believes that their constitutional right to clean water or clean air is being violated, that person can turn to the constitutional language and the constitutional right to try to vindicate their constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. The legal life is in the language, just purely standing on its own, which is the same with all the other fundamental rights we hold dear. And the obligation to protect environmental rights must apply throughout government, from the local town council to the legislator to the governor's office and every administrative agency in between. Now, many people say to me after I've described this, well, gosh, Maya, does a constitutional green amendment really make a difference? After all, you said that Pennsylvania has one of these, and look at what's happening in Pennsylvania. Amongst other things, Pennsylvania is being ravaged by the fracking industry. Their water, their air, the climate of all of us, our natural landscape, species of all kinds are being devastated by the consequences of fracking. So how good can a green amendment really be, Maya? They will ask. You might be asking. Well, I'm here to tell you that a green amendment is powerful and is important because there's some really important fundamentals to understand about Pennsylvania's story. Pennsylvania's constitutional green amendment was actually conceived of by this tremendous visionary, Pennsylvania Senator Franklin Curry, who actually conceived of the green amendment, crafted the green amendment, and led the way for it to be added to the Pennsylvania Constitution 50 years ago. And so 50 years ago, the people of Pennsylvania secured Article 1, Section 27 of the Constitution that did recognize their rights to clean air and pure water and a healthy environment, and the duty of every government official at every level of government to protect those environmental rights for both present and future generations. But there's more to this story. Sadly, almost as soon as that language was added to the Constitution, there were some bad cases that were brought. And long story short, the Pennsylvania courts issued decisions, including the Supreme Court, that declared this Article 1, Section 27 environmental rights language to be just good policy. And like we talked about earlier, good policy is just advice. You can take it or leave it. And that's what Pennsylvania legislators did. They left it. And so for 42 years, we had this really powerful language in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution, but nothing changed for the people of Pennsylvania when it came to environmental protection. It was during this 42 years when that environmental rights amendment, that green amendment, was just a statement of policy, that fracking came to Pennsylvania communities and began ravaging the natural resources and the people of Pennsylvania. It was also during this 42 years that the Pennsylvania legislators decided that they wanted to make it even easier for the fracking industry to have their way with Pennsylvania's natural resources and communities, and so got together and passed a law that was actually written by the fracking industry, as it turns out, that they passed in 2012. It was passed by the legislators, signed by the governor, and when it was passed, it was dubbed Act 13. And the thing to know about Act 13 was that it was literally a gift basket to the fracking industry. It gave the industry automatic waivers from environmental protection standards. It mandated that drilling and fracking operations, by virtue of state law, be allowed to happen in every part of every community, including in the heart of residential districts. That municipalities could not use their authority to cordon off the fracking industry to the industrial portions of their community. No, no, no. The frackers were allowed to come as close with their operating fracking well pads as close as 300 feet to people's homes. It relieved the industry of the obligation to notify those on private drinking water wells that their drinking water had potentially become contaminated by nearby fracking operations, and much, much more. And so, long story short, because of Act 13, while things were already really bad for the people of Pennsylvania when it came to fracking, things were about to get a whole lot worse. Now, we at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network have been battling against fracking in the 4 states of our watershed for many, many years. And when Act 13 was passed, we knew that we had to find a way to take on this devastating law because of the devastating consequences it would have on even more communities and natural resources when it came to fracking. And so as we sat down to ponder our options, we were faced with the usual options that communities have when legislators have passed anti-environmental legislation, right? We considered we could protest. Okay, that wasn't going to fix the problem. Perhaps we could convince our legislators to amend or repeal the law. Truth is, that wasn't going to happen with Act 13 and that Pennsylvania legislature. Perhaps perhaps the people of Pennsylvania could elect better people to office. So next time around, right, in the next legislature, we could turn things around. Just as would happen when faced with any kind of challenge like this, that kind of electoral change comes too late. There's already irreparable harm inflicted. So that was an unacceptable response. We could sit down, shut up, and take it and move on. We weren't going to do that. Not if you know my personality. But as we pondered, we realized that in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we had something more than most people in states across our nation. We had that long ignored constitutional environmental rights amendment in the Bill of Rights section of the Pennsylvania Constitution. So we decided we were going to challenge that pro-fracking law by claiming that it would violate the environmental rights of the people of Pennsylvania. Our legal challenge went all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And despite the fact that that Supreme Court at the time was a very conservative Supreme Court, we got an amazing victory with the plurality opinion written by the very conservative Chief Justice of that court. And I want you to read with me a few of the things that Chief Justice Castile wrote in the opinion that issued in December of 2013. He wrote that by any responsible account, the exploitation of the Marcellus Shale Formation will produce a detrimental effect on the environment, on the people, their children, and future generations. That the natural resources being harmed were resources essential to life, to health, and to liberty, and that as a result, the provisions of Act 13 that we were challenging were in fact unconstitutional because they would violate the environmental rights of the people of Pennsylvania. And in that moment, with that victory, we defeated some of the most devastating aspects of Act 13 and prevented the exponential expansion of the fracking industry in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But more than that, we breathed legal life into that long ignored environmental rights amendment and restored to the people of Pennsylvania their constitutional rights to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. It was a really powerful moment and victory with such far-reaching benefits for the people of Pennsylvania. And at this point, I think hopefully for the nation. Now, in the wake of that victory, we've been going forth, using that victory since December of 2013, setting more and more powerful precedents when it comes to environmental rights. It's not an instant panacea, but we now have this most powerful tool. But as we were going forth doing this work, I was thinking more and more about the power and importance of what we had accomplished with our constitutional victory. And I literally had what I call a Green Amendment epiphany. I realized that our rights to a clean and healthy environment are worthy of Bill of Rights recognition and protection. And that we needed communities across our nation to rise up together and demand and defend our environmental rights. And that the best way they could do that was to rise up together and seek and secure the passage of constitutional green amendments like Pennsylvania has in every single state across our nation. And ultimately at the federal level in what I call a Green Amendment movement. And we need a movement because, as I said, having looked at every constitution across our nation, only 2 states have this kind of constitutional Green Amendment. So we need it in every state. And when we get to the right tipping point, we'll go forth and seek one at the federal level. And it was in the wake, right, of this epiphany that I defined the term, the Green Amendment, and I really started going across the nation to try to spread this good word. And the movement began. And we've had such powerful resonance with states across our nation. And at this point, there are Green Amendment proposals in 13 states already, including in the state of New Mexico. And we have Senator Cecilia Lopez here with us tonight, who's going to talk about that because she's our legislative champion in New Mexico. We also have a Green Amendment in the state of New York that's made it so far through the process that this coming November, the people of New York are going to decide whether or not they want to have a Green Amendment in their Bill of Rights. So by the end of the year, we might have 3 Green Amendments in our nation. Now, I want to go over really quickly, how would a Green Amendment change things, right? How does it change things if we secure it in a state? And I'm going to do it broad strokes. First off, It does mean that our environmental rights are on par with those other human, civil, and political rights we hold dear. We all know how powerfully the rights to free speech and freedom of religion, private property rights, and gun rights are protected because they're recognized in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. Well, that same irreplaceable power now comes to bear for the environment. It means that government officials constitutionally have to focus on prevention of harm first when they are legislating, regulating, permitting, or decision-making. They don't get to hop to the end of the process, accept pollution and degradation as a foregone conclusion, and just focus on what permit they're going to issue to manage the who, the when, the where of the pollution and degradation. They have to focus on prevention first. Environmental justice is truly empowered by having a Green Amendment, because now every individual has the same right, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their socioeconomics, where they live. Every individual has the same right to a clean and healthy environment. And all government officials at every level of government are constitutionally bound to protect the environmental rights of all the people and all the communities, and to protect those rights equitably. Constitutionally, we can no longer have environmental sacrifice zones. It just doesn't work anymore. Green amendments, when properly written and placed, start to make us think generationally, which is so much more powerful than thinking about the next year or the next year or the next year. Now we really are thinking about future generations. It totally changes the process. Informed decision-making, considering existing conditions, existing environmental burdens, science, cumulative impacts. This now becomes a mandatory part of the decision-making process, not just an information gathering exercise that can sit on the shelf after the fact. Green amendments strengthen how we interpret existing laws, because those laws all now get interpreted through this lens of protecting environmental rights. So what's now on the books gets strengthened in terms of its interpretation and implementation. Green amendments fill the gaps, because as I said, people can now rely directly upon the constitutional right when they find that they have a problem with the environment that is rising to that constitutional level. So if there is not a law to address PFAS contamination in a community's drinking water, they can now turn to their constitutional right to clean water to try to get the protection they need. The goal of a Green Amendment is to get better decisions in the first place. Advance the good, prevent the bad. The reality of a Green Amendment is when our government officials get it wrong, people can have immediate access to the courts to vindicate their constitutional rights to a clean and healthy environment. And I want to stress that it's not just about the law. It's also about the way we think about the environment, and we think about environmental advocates, right? No longer are those who are rising up for environmental protection or environmental justice dismissed as tree huggers or fish lovers or not in my backyarders or job killers or eco-terrorists, as we've been called. Now we are recognized for what we truly are: United States patriots that are rising up to protect the rights of all the people in our great nation. And in the environmental justice context, I want to give people just a few examples, a few more minutes, a few more examples of how a Green Amendment can really make a difference when we are fighting for true environmental justice for communities. Green amendments can be used to address problematic permitting, whether we're talking about new permits or permit renewals. If we can show that that permit is going to create or exacerbate the unfair burdening of communities of color with pollution or degradation, we can now turn to the Green Amendment for some justice. Or if that permitting process failed to consider cumulative impacts and existing conditions, we can turn to the Green Amendment to help us deal with that problematic permitting and that injustice. If we've got new laws or regulations that have been passed that we can demonstrate will unfairly burden environmental justice communities, we don't have to wait for the damage to be done. All we have to do is demonstrate that that's a likely outcome, and we can now rely on the Green Amendment to prevent the implementation of those laws, like we did with that devastating Act 13. Green amendments are not just about preventing new pollution or new degradation, We can also use them proactively to address existing harms. For example, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where we're right now using the Green Amendment to secure the cleanup of a long ignored toxic site, a site that's been contaminated for decades, that the state knew about, that has a spreading pollution, anything, even though we had known responsibles. Well, we're using the Green Amendment to get that site cleaned up for the protection of communities and future generations. When it all comes down to is that we all need and we all deserve clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments. And so I hope that you will all agree with me at the end of this presentation and the end of this evening that we all need and we all deserve a constitutional Green Amendment in every state constitution across our nation, and then ultimately in our federal constitution as well. So thank you for coming to National Green Amendments Day, and I hope that we can partner up and work together to make this happen across our nation. Thank you so much. You're on mute, Maria.
Forgive me. Thank you, Maya. That was really powerful, and I hope that everybody is really going to think about the presentation and how this is giving a right. And we really, really need that. From here, we want to introduce our panelists. Well, we actually want them to introduce themselves, and while they do that, to answer a question, which is why the Green Amendment resonates with them. So I'm going to start out with our esteemed Senator Cecilia Lopez. If you can introduce yourself and tell us why the Green Amendment resonates with you.
Thank you, Maria. It is such an honor to be here, and it was just so exciting to hear Maya once again. Every time I hear I'm inspired, and this is an inspiring day to celebrate the fact that 13 states are moving in this direction, and hopefully we'll get all 50. Yesterday and today, I was attending a water and natural resources hearing in Gallup, New Mexico. And we were in Navajo Nation lands, and it was really sad to hear the struggle of Native peoples, of Navajos, throughout the district, who don't have running water in their homes, who don't have access to clean water, whose way of life is being disrupted by the fact that they're unable to irrigate their lands, and the livestock that they're trying to raise they don't have the water because of the mega drought we've been experiencing, and the decisions that have been made that have over the course of time that have deprived them of a clean environment and of water, more particularly water. We also heard about traditional acequias in northern New Mexico, in which the associations that manage the acequias are struggling because they're trying to figure out what to do about the water. And again, we're struggling as a state with mega drought and what's going to happen with global climate change and how it's going to affect New Mexico. And so hearing this in the hearings, I thought, wow, just tonight, I'm going to speak about the Green Amendment. And your question is, why does it resonate? When I first got elected, or selected and then elected to the state Senate, I've been here for 3 years, I started arguing about our amendment that failed, that was not up to where it should be, as Maya pointed out, Article 20, Section 21 of the New Mexico Constitution. It's in the miscellaneous section of our Constitution, not in the Bill of Rights. It talks about how the environment should be of fundamental importance. It was passed in the 70s, and it got tremendous support by the people of New Mexico. And I know that they would be so disappointed with the fact that it has not been what they thought it would be. In fact, there's a case in New Mexico, the Sanders-Reed v. Martinez case, in which environmentalists tried to protect what Governor Richardson had done with regard to climate, to protection of the environment and to addressing climate change. His regulations, the regulations of that administration, were totally reversed summarily by the Martinez administration. And the attempt to use Article 20, Section 21, which is in the miscellaneous section of the Constitution and does not provide an individual right, was met with defeat. The court basically said that Article 20, Section 21 does not create a trustee relationship between the legislature and the environment, and it does not create an individual right to clean air, water, and a healthy environment. So when I read the Green Amendment, the Green Amendment for the Generations, I knew that this was something that New Mexico has needed for a long time, and we need it now. And I am very proud to be one of many legislators in New Mexico. I want to give a shout out to the many Senator Souls, Joanne Ferrari, Senator Pope. We just got a sign on from Jerry Ortiz-Pino, Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino tonight. Senator Liz Stefanik has signed on. We're getting more and more legislators who want to be a part of making sure that we can use this amendment to protect our fragile environment here in New Mexico. That's why I'm here.
Thank you very much. Fantastic and inspiring answer. And I'm glad it's really to see the sign-ons. Next, we're going to go to Dr. Shakobi Wilson, who's going to bring a different perspective. I like that we had a legislator. Now we're going to public health. Dr. Wilson, if you can introduce yourself and tell us why the Green Amendment resonates with you.
Yeah, thank you, Maria, and happy to be here today. Thank you for those comments, Senator, and also from Maya and also Carrie's comments earlier. And thoughts and prayers were her and her mom right now. If you think about where we are in this country and how so many communities of color and low wealth communities, as Carrie mentioned, are impacted by environmental injustice. I want to define environmental justice for y'all real quick. It's the citing of environmental hazards and locally unwanted land uses, primarily communities of color, low wealth communities that have been disempowered, marginalized in this country. We're talking about power plants, incinerators, petrochemical operations. You go to landfills. You can talk about industrial chicken farms, industrial hog farms, large highways. You can talk about concrete plants. And when I'm talking about power plants, I'm not talking about coal-fired power plants. I'm also talking about natural gas, because that's a euphemism, fossil gas power plants, right? And so for some reason, these facilities tend time and time again to be disproportionately found in communities where people look like me, where people are Latinx, where people are low wealth. Why is that? That's because of the built-in racism, environmental racism in this country. There's no reason why you should have so many communities of color being sacrifice zones for industrial operations, whether it be port activities and goods movement in Savannah, in Newark when Kim Gaddy, thoughts and prayers with Kim in the Newark area, whether it be down in North Charleston, New Orleans, any coastal ports, any river ports, whether it be communities are dealing with fracking issues, right? In West Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in New York, in the Southwest, people who are dealing with oil and gas in Texas, right? In California, time and time again, these operations are impacting communities of color, low wealth communities, our indigenous brothers and sisters. We have a right to clean air, clean water, safe housing, safe food, right? I'm gonna add a few things to that list. These are human rights. As John Eicher, a colleague of mine who fights against industrial chicken farms, say, we have those rights. As Omega Wilson, one of my community mentors down in Mebane, North Carolina, says, this is the right to basic amenities. In America, people do not have the right to basic amenities. And this is why we need a Green Amendment. We should have these rights in our Constitution. We have civil rights. I would counter and say that if Title VI of the Civil Rights Act was enforced, that talks about disparate impacts, we wouldn't be having environmental justice, right? But when I'm talking about environmental justice, I'm talking about environmental racism, I'm also talking about environmental slavery, how some communities are used, their bodies are literally used to host pollution. as Maya mentioned, the permitting process. We're talking about state sanctioning poisoning of communities of color, low wealth communities. So you got folks who are dealing with violence in their communities, police brutality. Carrie said connected dots, criminalization, how women of color and your body, women, their bodies are being legislated, regulated, right? That's a type of violence. So we got this violence upon violence. We're talking about toxic violence. We're talking about state sanction violence. So what isn't the Constitution protecting everyone, right? Dr. Bull would say it's the complexion for protection. So you have racism is a major driver behind this, okay? And you think about that racism then, think about the generations of kids. As Maya mentioned, lead. We all know that what lead does to folks. Carrie mentioned that thing too. So how are you gonna put America first, y'all? You'll put your kids first. How do we have kids who are growing up and living, been exposed to lead? How many generations of children have been thrown away? Their potential's been capped. Instead of the future Jacoby Wilson, the future Carrie has, the future senator, the future Maya. How many of these people having the opportunity to move forward because of neurodevelopment impacts? You heard Carrie say about the exposure issues with nitrates. We shouldn't have folks exposed to lead. We shouldn't have people exposed to nitrates. We shouldn't have folks exposed to PCBs. We should have communities exposed to polyaromatic hydrocarbons. We should have folks living in communities with air pollution issues. Come on, y'all, COVID-19. If the Clean Air Act protected all of us equally, right, in an equitable fashion, we wouldn't have COVID-19 hotspots, which are the same hotspots for air pollution in this country. Come on, y'all. That means our Constitution, our laws are not protecting all of us. I would say that the laws are protecting the average populations, but it's not protecting the people in the tails, the socially vulnerable, the economically vulnerable, the geographically vulnerable, the descendants of enslaved Africans who have migrated, who are living in the deep South, which is what? A zone for climate change, hurricanes, most named storms last year, right? We got folks dealing with hurricanes and people dealing with heat issues right now. We got brothers and sisters dealing with heat issues who are migrants who don't have access to water right now, right? Our laws are not protecting these folks. They haven't. That's why we need a Green Amendment. This is why we got to move forward and push for this. And just to end real quick, I'll come back around. No, I'm talking too long. But when you think about what Maya mentioned, all this development in the economy, this economy is built on the backs of marginalized folks. It's racial capitalism, right? And what I'm saying is, when you think about economic development, we've been conned, as Maya mentioned. It's pollution management. So what I'm saying is we need a Green Amendment to put people in public health first and stop putting pollution and profits first. I'll pass the mic back.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Thank you, Jacoby. Very powerful. And, you know, once you see these things, you can't unsee them. And I know that all of our panelists have seen, you know, you can't unsee birth defects. You can't unsee cancer. You just can't. So thank you for that. Now we're going to turn it over. Terry Sloan, we are thrilled to have you and have you introduce yourself and tell us why the Green Amendment resonates with you.
Thank you, Maria, and good evening, brothers and sisters. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Jacoby. Thank you, Antoinette. Underscore everything that has been said here already tonight. I don't even know where I can start at this point. It's just incredible. It's got me fired up. Maya is always hearing her presentation always gets me ready to go out there with my gloves on and get ready to go fight the battle. And then hearing Jacoby just now, it just really resonates harder about the what we've faced, you know, as people of color, the discrimination, the racism, the environmental injustice that we've faced since our existence. We haven't seen no environmental justice since before the colonists showed up on our shores. But then again, I also would like quickly to acknowledge that here in Albuquerque, I am on the traditional lands of the Tewa Pueblo people, and it is an honor for me to speak to you tonight from here. Again, quickly also, again, my name is Terry Sloan. I am Dene and Hopi, born in the Kia'ani, which is the Towering House clan, and born for the Toadlini, which is Water Flows Together clan. I was born in Shiprock, New Mexico, originally from Tuba City, Arizona, the deep res. And now I'm an Albuquerque resident for 48 years. I am the director of my NGO, Southwest Native Cultures, to which I'm an accredited member of the United Nations. I'm also the City of Albuquerque's Intergovernmental Tribal Liaison. And I am also a Green Amendments for Generations board member. Along what we've been discussing, I've been actually fighting for environmental rights, human rights, Mother Earth for probably 33 years now, since my 20s. Starting with working with my Hopi uncle, Vernon Masayespa's NGO, Black Mesa Trust, which we helped stop the slurry of coal, utilizing over the years an estimated 50 billion gallons of water from our Hopi and Navajo aquifer in Black Mesa, Arizona. And our victory was actually shutting down the Mojave generating station, but unfortunately it took 30 years, over 30 years to do that, and 50 gallons of water later. And the result was dried up springs, dried up agriculture on the Hopi Reservation, and also in the region for the Navajos on the Navajo side. Relocation of Navajo and Hopi people, families over the years. And so again, we, along the lines of environmental racism, it was faced heavily by those people who had to be moved from their lands, their traditional lands, displaced. Environmental discrimination, of course, it is existence in this particular example here. And then, when I first heard about the Green Amendment, it was having breakfast with Maya. Thanks to our good friend Mike Neese bringing us together to talk about this issue or these issues and this wonderful idea of the Green Amendment for our Constitution. I was in 5 minutes after hearing Maya speak and going into the discussion, and I was ready to go. So I'm still here, and this was back in August 2018, I believe, or was it? Yeah. So it's been a couple of years now, 19. So it's already been a couple of years. So I was in right away. And what I thought in reading and understanding, of course, reading the book to the Green Amendment, was a chance to legally and constitutionally protect Mother Earth, and our sacred water from environmental harms that we have no control over. It gives us a chance to have some control and then have some monitoring of the activities that mining, oil and gas industries bring to harm and destruct our sacred lands. And so that was one of the main things I thought about when I became exposed to the Green Amendment. And hopefully one day, we get to see, and I've been trying to promote it with the tribes here in New Mexico, including the Navajo Nation, is that we see a Green Amendment passed by the tribes. They're sovereign nations, they have their own self-determination. They can create these laws. At the United Nations years ago, when we were talking about environmental justice, I presented and told the tribes that they need to pass their own EPA laws. They can do that. They have the right to do that, and nothing can stop them. So I'm hoping one day all the tribes here in New Mexico and Arizona will have their own Green Amendment. And then hopefully we'll see it across the country and hopefully around the world. Because I hope as we progress with the Green Amendment, I'll go on an international limb here, that I would like to present this also at the United Nations to our Indigenous brothers around the world to take a look at. Because I think something at this level and with this much potential power can make headway and create protections for the lands that are currently being desecrated. We're seeing it in Brazil, in South America, in Africa. Hopefully, we get to see changes in our lifetime. Maybe not, but I think with this Green Amendment and the movement that it's stimulating and creating, we may not see the results of our labors, but we'll at least lay the groundwork and get it started. You know, our youth, our children can carry on this process. Hopefully my daughter, my son, you know, move forward with it one day. And so you know, that's the power of it that I see the Green Amendment has, and then all the things that everybody talked about earlier. Hopefully from this recording, we can create this gigantic list of things that we can share with everybody so we can readdress it and continue to be reminded what the Green Amendment can be. I mean, if we had a Green Amendment here in New Mexico, we wouldn't see the desecration and the destruction of my Dene homelands on the eastern side of our reservation along what we call the Highway 550 corridor. Is what I call fracking alley. I mean, there's approximately 15,000 oil wells in this region, fracking and drilling, etc. And it's just horrible to see. I had a client in Shiprock back in from starting for the 80s. So I drove that corridor and I saw it begin and see the creation and the destruction over the last 30 years. And it's been horrible to see. You know, if we had a Green Amendment, we would not have seen what happened at Standing Rock. You know, it could have been prevented, stopped, or some way, you know, not allowed to happen if the tribes or the states, North Dakota and South Dakota, had one in place. Even the tribe itself could have stopped it if they had a Green Amendment. We wouldn't be seeing what's happening now. It's our sacred Oak Flats in Arizona to the Apaches, potential mining for copper. You know, come on. We can't destroy a sacred place, a sacred site, sacred land for the sake of money. You know, let's reevaluate our priorities here. That's what we really need to do. And again, if we had a Green Amendment, we could have stopped Peabody Coal Energy from taking, you know, and wasting 50 billion gallons of our pristine Dene and Hopi water. So I'll put an end to it here, but I have more to say hopefully down the road. And thank you, Rhea. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Terry. And I think our panelists have done a wonderful example already of talking about where the Green Amendment would have made a difference. I want to shoot a couple questions to each individual. You just brought up, Terry, about environmental justice and the principles. Dr. Wilson, you taught me environmental justice and the principles. How does the Green Amendment connect to the 17 principles of environmental justice? Jacoby, that's for you.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Thank you again for Terry for following up on what I was saying. I really appreciate your words and making those connections to just always uplifting our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And I just wanted to say that I'm in Maryland on the lands of the Piscataway people, and you know, wouldn't be able to be here as what I say real quick, Maria, because I like to say, you know, you have the stolen lands of Indigenous peoples and the stolen bodies of African folks. So I just want to share in that with Terry. So thank you for that. Put in the chat the 17 principles of environmental justice, so y'all can go, all the audience members can go click on that link. But basically, this year is the 30th anniversary of the first People of Color Summit in 1991, and that's where these 17 principles were codified. And basically, we have folks who were fighting for environmental justice, Black, Latinx folks, Indigenous folks, Asian brothers and sisters. Some of the, if you know anything about the EJ movement, some of the old heads, I would say, like the older inspirational leaders and who are very, very still active in the movement, they wrote these principles, y'all. And so when you think about the Green Amendment, it can make these environmental justice principles come to life. So if you look at principle 1, affirms the sacredness of Mother Earth. Terry just said it, ecological unity and the interdependence of all species. I hear y'all saying it in the chat. We're talking about clean air and water for everyone, right? And the right to be free from ecological destruction. Principle 2, demands that public policy be based on mutual respect and justice, okay? Principle 3, another one, sustainability and future generations, maintains the right to ethical, balanced, and responsible use of land, renewable resources in the interest of a stable planet for humans and other living things, right? These principles were codified again in 1991. Affirms the fundamental right to political, economic, cultural, environmental self-determination of all peoples. 6, Stop producing pollution, prevention, precautionary principles, no toxins, no hazardous waste, no radioactive materials, right? The companies have to be accountable. They cannot keep externalizing their pollution to us. They cannot keep poisoning our future generations. They cannot keep poisoning developing babies, right? They cannot keep poisoning our elders, right? Look at principle 7, demands the right to participate as equal partners at every level of decision making. Okay, let me keep it moving. Workers, principle 9, Carrie brought principle 9 up. Protects the right of victims of environmental justice to receive full compensation and reparations for damages as well as quality health care. Environmental reparations. Maya talks about the Green Amendment, restoration. That's what these communities need. So preventing, but restoring, rebuilding. And let me just keep it moving real quick. You look at principle 11, special legal natural relations with Native peoples. You look at principle 12, urban rural ecological policies to clean up and rebuild our cities. So the Green Amendment gives us an opportunity to make these come to life, make these real, make these law. And so I just want to share that with you, and I'll pass the mic back to Maria.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jacoby. And I want to take the next question to our senator. So with so much political bickering right now over policing, racism, and the environment, what opportunities do you see for actually securing a Green Amendment in states?
That is a great question, because I think that you have to see the relationship between all of this. And the relationship is there are the people who, there are how profits exploit people. And we need to put people first, the environment, the health. And I neglected to say something about the New Mexico version of the Green Amendment. We also included cultural rights. And we specifically did that at the urging of Native activists who are saying, you know, we need a Green Amendment to protect our way of life, our thinking, our relationship to the land, our cultural rights. And that is so incredibly important. And we can, when you talk about opportunities in this environment, I think the opportunity is to get everybody together, all of us who are advocating for civil rights, for people's rights, for putting people above profits, that this is an important and fundamental aspect, because this is about our health. And with that, we can't do anything else if we don't have our health. And so the opportunity I see is gather us all together and to stand for this along with all of our civil rights, including police accountability, including changing the way our bodies are policed, including the way our bodies are used, including the way our land is raped. So I see tremendous opportunity, and I appreciate the question, and we need to gather together, and I will fight for it with every breath.
Thank you. And that's going to lead right into our next question to Terry, and then we're going to go to Maya. So Terry, the Green Amendment, how does it complement the environmental and generational beliefs of Native American tribes?
Good question. That's a very powerful question. I think what it does is it touches on our instincts. It touches on our core feeling in I'll say in natives, but also in everybody actually. I mean, it touches on the genes in our body. It touches on all that to help to stimulate what we need to do for Mother Earth, what we need to do for our land, our air, and our water, our sacred water. I mean, I think what it does is it highlights, it helps us to, we talk about how indigenous science and indigenous ways of living, all those things, the Green Amendment helps provide us the ability to do that and continue to do that. I mean, we look at how Native societies, indigenous societies sustain their way of life, their way of cultures. I mean, the way when I've talked in several, in meetings and other events, I'll say that the Native Americans were probably the first sustainable cultures that were on planet Earth. You know, I tend to say when I can, and I'll say it here, we're still here. You know, and Native Western science is beginning to look at Native science now to see how they've done it. What do we do? I mean, I look at environmental justice, and I think about how in our native way we use what we need to use, but we don't take more than we need. You know, if there's some agriculture, some corn, we don't take it all out and just eat it all. We take a part of it, you know, so there's more for others. Or if there's a plant that's growing, we don't take all the plant because we know it still needs to grow, and there's others that needs to also utilize it. So that's the kind of sustainable thinking that we utilize in the way we live. And so that also helps sustain our cultures down the road. So I think the Green Amendment, in a sense, does complement a lot of that within our native culture, indigenous ways that we have lived and survived the last 20, 30,000 years. I mean, if you look at the anthropological studies within our region, you look at Chaco Canyon, and even here in New Mexico, they're believed that the indigenous peoples have been here for probably 30, 40,000 years. And so they obviously figured out a way to sustain their lives. And I think in this day and age now, 2019 or 21, sorry, that we can now touch and utilize and look at the Green Amendment as a way to reestablish and reconnect with our genes within ourselves, with whom we are. And again, you know, I think when I talk about indigenous peoples too, if I'm especially in a mixed audience, I'll tell people that I'm not just the only indigenous person here. You're indigenous too. You're indigenous too, to your lands and where you're from. So we all have that responsibility to be responsible to our land, air, water, Mother Earth. And we also need to think of the 7 generations down the road, and not just ourselves today and tomorrow, but down, you know, the future also is very important. Hope that answers that.
Yes, Terry, that's very powerful. Maya, we're going to throw one to you now, and then I'm going to take a couple questions from Ted and Paul that we got in the chat box. Maya, one of the problems with environmental racism is its insidious nature. How can the Constitution stop this behavior if there is no smoking gun to prove racist intent? Or another way to say, if you can't prove the government was intentionally trying to disproportionately burden BIPOC communities, how can the Constitution help stop environmental racism?
So one of the most powerful aspects of a Green Amendment, and just in constitutional protection in general, is it really is looking at the effect. It's not looking at the intent. So what you have to show in order to use the Green Amendment to address the unfair burdening of communities of color, Native American communities, immigrant, low-income communities, is demonstrate that the action or the activity that government has taken is or will unfairly burden communities of color with more pollution and degradation than everybody else. You don't actually have to show that they intentionally, although so often we know this is what is happening, that they intentionally put that highly polluting industrial operation right next to the Black community, where there are other 10 other highly polluting industrial operations, and they did that placement in order to protect the richer, whiter, more politically connected folks over there. You don't have to show that that was the intention. What you have to show is that the contributions of the air pollution or the water pollution or the toxic contamination that is actually impacting the health, the safety, the lives, the bodies, the communities of that Black community is unfair, is disproportionate, is higher, is reaching a distinctly harmful level in terms of their bodies, their health, their safety, their water, their environment, their air, Either you can just show that it's rising to a very high level so that people are being impacted in a deeply profound way that rises to an unconstitutional level, or you can show that there is this unfair burdening, that all the pollution is being placed on the Black and brown and low income communities and not everybody else. The disproportionate burdening is sort of another pathway to show that you may have a constitutional violation. Another pathway to show that you might have an unconstitutional violation is to show that during the decision-making process, government officials did not in fact consider the cumulative impacts, the existing conditions, the science about what was going to happen, that they essentially looked at the regulations. The regulation said, you can place this kind of highly polluting industrial operation in this kind of place. We check the boxes, boom, give the permit, and there it goes. But they didn't do the constitutional work of looking at the actual effect. So they didn't engage in truly informed decision-making. That in and of itself can be a constitutional violation. And I want you to know that we've successfully demonstrated that in Pennsylvania. And there have been cases in Montana as well, that the failure to engage in informed decision-making is the problem. When you're talking about legislation or regulations, as I noted in my talk, you don't actually have to wait until you have the irreparable harm inflicted on people's lives, bodies, and communities. You have to just show that that outcome is likely to happen, or that disproportionate burdening is likely to happen. And that can be your evidence for a constitutional challenge. But showing racial intent, showing discriminatory intent, you don't have to find that smoking gun, because the constitutional right is focused on the outcome, what is actually happening, or the process by which we got there. But you don't have to find the discriminatory intent or prove it to show a constitutional violation and be able to actually protect people.
And I thank you for that, because, and what I love about this, Maya, is that it goes all the way through local zoning, right? Which is so powerful, because that's where a lot of these bad decisions are being made. They're weaponizing, zoning against us. So now we're going to move on to a question that came in from one of our viewers. And it looks like this is going to go to Maya and to the senator. It has been argued that states cannot guarantee a safe climate or even perhaps a livable climate. How should a constitutional green amendment address fundamental rights to climate in the face of the climate emergency? And Senator, you want to start, and then we'll jump over to Maya?
You're on mute, Senator.
Sorry, that's the word, right? The word of the Zoom era is you're on mute.
Yes.
That's the phrase. I think that the point here about our climate crisis and what we're dealing with is exactly the argument for why we need this. Of course, the state can't guarantee that everyone is going to have clean air, water, that everything's going to be pristine and we're going to live in paradise. That's not realistic. But what the state should guarantee is that there's no one community that suffers the burdens of the climate crisis and of pollution and environmental development equally. That no one community suffers it unequally, is what I was trying to say, that the burden is just not on one. And I was thinking about, in fact, I was going to put it in the chat, Mountain View in the city of Albuquerque. The city just issued a permit for a hot mix asphalt plant in an area that's zoned for agriculture. And this is in a residential community of working class, low income people of color. Since the 70s, Mountain View has auto recycling, a sewage plant facilities, fertilizer suppliers, contaminated groundwater, 2 Superfund sites, and high levels of air pollution. We cannot permit them to be a sacrifice zone. And that is what the Green Amendment is necessary for as we go into the climate crisis. And so when our resources are harder and harder to share, we need to make sure that we share them and that we don't just make one group be the haves and the other group be the haves not when it comes to the environment. So that's like I said, I think it's an argument for it. And you're absolutely right. We can't guarantee it for every person, but we can guarantee that as we enter this, that we share it. We share the burdens and also the benefits.
Excellent answer. Maya, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so that's a great segue into my contribution to the answer. And by the way, I just want to acknowledge, I think that is Ted Bolin answering that question, and he has been a terrific champion advancing our Green Amendment in the state of Hawaii with Senator Gabbard and other legislators. So thanks, Ted, for that important question, because we get asked it a lot. And the senator so eloquently talked about the importance of protecting everybody equitably, particularly when we're talking about devastating consequences of things like the climate crisis. My contribution to the answer is sort of functionally about understanding how the constitutional Green Amendment will work, right? So the Constitution fundamentally is the agreement between the people and their government. And it is the document where the people give the government permission to govern over them, but then sort of puts in place the rules of the road. And the elements that are in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution is the people saying to their government, when we allow you to govern over us, as you are engaging in actions and activities, these are the things that you may not infringe upon as you do your work. So it is very literally a limitation on government action or government activity. It is not, as the senator said, a broad guarantee that you will never have infringement on your free speech, your religious freedoms, or your other fundamental rights when you are out there in the world. But it is a constitutional guarantee, right, within constitutional limitations that play out in the courts, saying that when government is engaged in, let's take the Green Amendment, right? And if you have a constitutional right to a stable or livable climate, then what the Green Amendment is saying to government officials is, government officials, when you are doing your work, when you are legislating, decision-making, regulating, permitting, you may not undertake that work in a way that will infringe on our constitutional rights to a livable and stable climate. So it is about guiding the actions and the activities of the government officials in the state where the Green Amendment is in place, and can have profound and powerful effects as they undertake their governmental work within that state. And it is a reason why we need a Green Amendment in every state, to make sure that every government official in every state is being mindful of protecting, constitutionally mindful and obligated to undertake their work in a way that protects the climate rights of all the people within their constitutional boundaries. And why we also need a federal Green Amendment to make sure that when federal government officials are undertaking their work, they are doing the same. When we have constitutional rights to a stable and livable climate in state after state after state after state after state and at the federal level, then that means that all of our government officials will be behaving in a responsible way when it comes to climate protection. And that's how we will very significantly advance the ball for ensuring that truly everywhere across our nation, people are in fact enjoying the benefits of a livable, stable climate, and that we are ensuring that we, as the people of the United States, are doing our part to protect the climate rights of all the people in the world, right? So it's about understanding how the Constitution works and not letting people use that red herring of, well, you can't guarantee that I'm going to have a clean and livable climate, way over here. No, you have to understand how the Constitution works. It's about a limitation on the actions. It's about guiding the actions of the government officials who are subject to that Green Amendment obligation.
Thank you. Thanks, Maya, for that. I just want to make a quick announcement, and then we're going to throw the next question is going to go to Terry and Jacoby. If there is, we're going to put a link there in the chat box. They will send out to you a free sticker if you signed up for this. And this is going to keep us going with next steps. So we're asking if you can stay in touch because we're going to be getting into more questions in case anybody has to jump off. So the next question I am going to throw to Terry and then Dr. Wilson. And this question comes from Paul. It says, so I get my drinking water from a well. Suppose it's contaminated. What would my recourse be under the Green Amendment? Just as an example of what might apply to other environmental concerns. Terry, we're going to start with you on that.
Thank you, Paul. That's a good question. I think I would really get statistical information on the type of contamination that has been done and provide it to the state or the local municipality that you live in. Because of what I've been promoting for organizations that are working to protect like a sacrifice zone or protect a discrimination zone, like we're talking about on Mountain View, I'm also a member of the Greater Chaco Coalition. And one thing that we began to do is track air data, air quality data. And so we're using that air quality data to provide statistics to the state, to the oil and gas associations and groups that are supporting oil and gas, but also need an understanding of the effects of the contamination and the levels of contamination that we're seeing. So I think on that same line, we've also been wanting to set up water monitoring stations around the various areas where oil and gas development is occurring. So that way we can begin to track the level of contamination that is happening. I mean, it's happening, it's just not being reported, unfortunately, here in New Mexico. Unfortunately, the regulations through the oil conservation division only require self-reporting. It's not mandated. And so, of course, I'm not going to report that, oh, we just spilled 100,000 gallons of gas or oil near a riverbed or something like that. They're not going to say that. But anyhow, I would get statistical information. You actually can buy water testing kits, at the store. I've tested my own water here at my house, and you can do that, or else engage a group or an organization that can support or provide you that type of backup. I worked with a client. I'm also an accountant by profession, Navajo Technical University, and they're willing to provide that type of services through their own monitoring department themselves. So they're willing to do that for you, or even reach out to a local UNM or Mexico State or wherever you're from. There may be the department there may be able to provide assistance to do that type of measuring of your water contamination. But then again, if we had a green amendment, then we would be able to, stop or at least somehow get a hold of not letting this happen in regards to a water well. I thought about buying some land behind the mountain, and where I was looking at, they don't have water lines. So I'd have to drill for water myself. So I would be with you. I'd be very concerned on how clean that water is if I, found water in the aquifer, and I would definitely fight to protect that water and make sure it stays clean, because as has been said before on many occasions, water is life. Water is alive. It thinks, it moves, and we can't live without it, you know, and so hopefully that answered the question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Wilson, you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So it speaks to the importance of this meeting. As I said earlier, that I'll say this way, our environmental regulatory schema does not protect all of us. So you have the Clean Water Act, but that's not related to wells. You have the Safe Drinking Water Act that's supposed to protect drinking water, but as you're saying, the Safe Drinking Water Act does not protect wells. That is a huge gap, y'all. We have 20% of this population in this country who live in rural areas. Majority of those folks are probably on well water, and they're living near hazards, agricultural operations, pesticides, K-foods, fracking sites, other types of industries, you know, mining. So that means you got a good portion of the population who's not being protected by the Safe Drinking Water Act. So I think the Green Amendment will help fill that gap. And you think I believe it will provide the opportunity to implement at least see tort law, give you more power to sue and get redress, polluter pays principle, because if you find, and going back to Terry's point about collecting, we had water quality monitoring networks. So to ensure that they are protecting your environmental rights, that means the states, if you're going to allow these type of industries to operate, either you or the entity has to pay for monitoring networks, right? So that means you have more intensive, hyper-local water quality monitoring networks. A lot of my work is on air quality. So I like to say hyper-local air quality monitoring networks to make sure everywhere is covered, to inform, we see pollution impacts, and then to find redress. So I think it will allow for prevention and precaution, and also force the states to say, if we're going to do this, either we're going to have to pay for it or they're going to have to pay for it. And right now, it's been externalized to you. So I think that part of investing in infrastructure for monitoring, investing in infrastructure for health monitoring and tracking, and investing in infrastructure to address the problems. That's what I think the Green Amendment will allow us to do with right now what we don't have when it comes to nitrates, when it comes to MRSA, when it comes to other chemical hydrocarbons that folks are exposed to, for folks who own rural well water who live near landfill, who live near petrochemical operations, who live near pesticides, right? Who've been impacted by biosolids, right? Who've been impacted by spray fields, on and on and on. So that's what I believe is true. And then also I believe a Green Amendment will override, in the case of the work that I do, the Right to Farm Act. I think it's a way to push back on Right to Farm Acts as well in many parts of this country too. So I'll stop talking. Hopefully that helps.
Yes. And something, I think I told Maya this, but a community actually in Pennsylvania where we do have a Green Amendment is being used now with industrial farms. And so there you go. So now we're going to we have a question for you, Maya. And it says, working throughout so many states, what have you learned or taken away from these states and their environmental needs, and how a Green Amendment could help them?
So great question. And I can't share everything that I've learned and continue to learn every day because it's just so much. But the one thing that I can tell you is that it's really important to please get in touch with me and let's partner up. The only states where we really see pitfalls and problems are where folks are not partnering up. They're not getting in touch. They're trying to go it alone. And we've even had a situation, actually twice now, where a legislator or a community member tried to do it on their own and they got some really important basic fundamentals wrong. And we ended up having to sort of circle up and work to defeat the proposal in order to leave the landscape clear for a true Green Amendment. Because the worst thing that would happen would be to have a faux false amendment advance that we know wouldn't accomplish true environmental protection and justice, it would fail. And then everybody, when we went to try to advance a true green amendment, would say, well, been there, done that, didn't work. And not only would that happen in the state where that bad amendment went forth, but across the nation, people would start pointing and say, hey, wait a second, in Florida, they just did it wrong and it didn't make a difference. So why on earth would we do that here across the country? So the most important thing is partner up. Let's work together, right? I'm not going to be the leader in your state. You're going to be the leader in your state. I just want to be a key partner to work with you to make sure that we get it right. So that's the big, most important lesson. And that would allow me to bring all of our experiences and tools and information and connections to bear on your effort in your state. Things like, what are going to be the strategic challenges that you're going to face where your opposition is going to try to undermine the Green Amendment through process steps, right? We've experienced that in New Mexico. We're learning and in fact, what happened in New Mexico happened in 2 other states where it was just a legislative trick to prevent the amendment from moving forward. So we know to anticipate that and defend it off. Can bring to bear experiences and knowledge and successes on language development. Every single state where we're advancing a green amendment, I have encouraged, here's the model language, but let's work together to come up with the right language for the personnel, your state's personality. Antoinette expressed a really great example for what developed out of our process in the state of New Mexico. We've had other modifications in every other state. We can anticipate what are going to be the challenges on the language and how do we fend that off? What are the tools we can use to make sure that everybody can be a Green Amendment leader in your state? Do our training sessions to bring everybody up to speed so we can all work together. You can lead, we can be a great partner, and together we can achieve success. So we have lots of lessons learned. Those are just a few of the highlights, but most important, just get in touch with myself or Green Amendments for the Generations, my organization. Let's partner up, let's work together. Let's not let ego or silliness get in our way. Let's just try to achieve success, because this is all about saving the world, and we can only do that together.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question now, and it goes to anyone. So what I'll do is ask everyone to give a really brief answer since we're getting close to the end here. The question is, could any of the panelists speak to the power they see in a green amendment for the future generations who are inheriting a planet currently experiencing the ills of climate change?
Well, I'll go ahead and start because I typed a little bit about it in the chat. I think the most powerful thing is the political power that all of the people have to come together to vote for something that is so profound, because then it cannot be ignored by all governmental officials, from the permitting process to the statutes to everything. It's going to color decision making up and down. That's what I see as the biggest power, and we need to do it for future generations. It's not optional. We must do it for future generations for them to thrive.
Excellent answer. Excellent answer. How about we start from the top of the screen, from my top, and go down? Terry?
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Antoinette. That was a great answer. What I'd like to add to that is that one of the biggest things that we'll see in the future is a clean Mother Earth, a cleaner planet, cleaner land, cleaner water. That would be the evidence, and that would be the power of the fact that the GA worked, and it was successful, and something we should take pride in doing and continuing to do for the next billion years if humanity lasts that long. So I think, to me, that would be one of the most powerful things that our future generations could see, is that it does work, that it did work, and that now, I can go walk over to a lake or a river and take a cup of water and drink it and not worry about it being contaminated, and breathe the air and not worry about whether I'm going to get asthma or I'm going to cough or whatever from that. So, that to me would be one of the biggest powers that we could see for the generations to come for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Great answer. Dr. Wilson, Jacoby, future generations. How's this gonna, what's it gonna do for us?
Yeah, no, I think Terry said it. As I said in one of my previous responses, it's an investment. You know, we are invested in the future, right? We're invested in today. We're invested in tomorrow, right? And so I think it's the promise. You know, one is I talk about. You know, I mentioned the whole issue of racism, and someone mentioned white supremacy. It speaks to the promise of America, right? We talk about inalienable rights, all the civil rights. It speaks to the promise that everybody can reach their full potential in America, regardless of where you live, where you work, where you play, where you pray, where you learn. Which Carrie wanted me to say. I didn't get to say it, so I'm saying it now. But so that it's the promise of that. And I think, you know, when you think about climate change, it's impacting all of us, but it's impacting some of us disproportionately. And I like to always say, like, when you look across the whole fossil fuel continuum, right, who's impacted from extraction to transport, to processing, to burning, you know, the products like plastics being produced, see what's happening in Cancer Valley, Louisiana, right, to Houston Ship Channel, to waste. You got some same folks. So we're investing in the promise of America, investing in the future, but also making sure that all Americans through this work, you know, through the Green Amendment will benefit and can have clean air, clean water. We don't have to deal with urban heat issues of flooding, forest fires. We don't have to deal with their native lands disappearing, the coastal lands disappearing, sea level rise, right? That we will still be here, that we'll be stronger, we'll be more powerful, and we do that together. And I think that's what we'll see.
Maya, anything to add?
So what a Green Amendment does is it takes the most powerful legal tool we have in the United States of America, and it brings it to bear for environmental protection, environmental justice, and protecting all communities equitably. It gives every single person a place, a priority place at the decision-making table, including the generations that have yet to be born. So even those who aren't right now with us, that are going to come decades, right, even centuries in the future, they now must be part of the protections that our constitutional Green Amendments will give. And so that's how a Green Amendment is going to benefit them. It's going to protect every aspect of their lives before they're even born, as long as we all work together, get it right, get the Green Amendments passed effectively, efficiently, quickly, and then most importantly, make sure that those Green Amendments are used smartly and that we don't get derailed by bad precedent like we did in Pennsylvania, but we can immediately put those Green Amendments to work for the benefit of present and future generations and all the natural resources that we also need to protect that share this earth with us.
Okay, we're going to do one final question. I would just like to add something real quick because Dr. Wilson touched on this. And, you know, we talk about exposure, right? And people being impacted. This is very, very, very real. And to me, I call it crimes against humanity, right? When we have damaged a child to where a child cannot be educated due to no fault of their own but exposure, this is real. We need to come together. We really need to get this done. It's so important, and I know we can do it. So with that, we want to thank everyone for attending this, and we want you to stay in touch because there's going to be more. But we're going to go around now, and we want to thank Maya, you, our excellent panel. Thank you. We appreciate you so much. Final words, and let's start with our esteemed senator, and we'll go the opposite direction. Well,
I just really want to encourage everyone to get involved, and particularly the folks on the line that are in New Mexico, get connected. It's going to be a lot of work to get this through. We need to get this on the ballot November 1922. So sign up, get involved, connect with me, connect with Maya, connect with Terry. There are so many people that are already working on it. Become part of the movement.
very good. Jacoby, up to you.
Oh, just to add quickly, I think movement is really important. I just want to say, environmental justice is really about, our shared humanity, right? It's about family. it's about love, it's about, solidarity. So I just want to make sure we leave with that, this Green Amendment is about protecting our family of humans, and our family of other living things, as I mentioned. And check out those 17 principles, and also, as Terry said eloquently. So just happy to be here and happy to support this this important growing movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry, last words of wisdom.
I'll start off then, or end with some philosophy. What is environmental justice? Environmental justice is when we can breathe our air without fear of breathing harmful man-made contaminants. It's when we can live on, live off of, and enjoy the land without fear of contamination of man-made contaminants. It's when we can drink our sacred water without fear of contamination from man-made pollutants, and the purity and cleanliness of the water is evident. It's when we respect Mother Earth, take care of her, nurture her, sustain her for the next 7 generations. Environmental justice is when humankind understands its role in taking care of Mother Earth, when humankind works together as brother and sister to take care of Mother Earth, when humankind works together to take care of each other without judgment of race, color, and or religion, and uses Mother Earth to nurture and grow with Mother Earth into antiquity. Thank you. Yeah, okay.
Beautiful. Maya, final words. And again, everyone, we're going to stay in touch. We're going to do this. All 50, we're going to do it. Okay, Maya, last words.
Just environmental pollution and degradation harms every aspect of all of our lives. And that's why we have to address it. And I would suggest to you, and I believe absolutely deeply, that racism and systemic racism harms all of us in every aspect of all of our lives. And I truly, truly, truly believe in the power of this Green Amendments for the Generations pathway in addressing systemic environmental racism and giving us the most powerful tool to bring it to an end, and also having this most powerful tool for being able to address all aspects of environmental pollution and degradation, so that truly, truly, truly all of us can share in the richness and the beauty and the joy and the wealth that a clean and healthy environment provides to all aspects of all of our lives. So I hope that you'll join my Green Amendment movement. I really believe in it, and I'm so honored that it resonates with so many. Thank you so much.
So we want to thank everyone from all across the country. So exciting to see you all join us. And I want to send one reminder that Maya talked about. If you want to do this in your state, that's the woman you contact right there, because she knows how to do it. And the language is so, so, so important. Stay connected and let's get it done. Okay. So thank you all, everyone. It's all about humanity. It's about love. Let's do this. Thank you. Good night.